I would like to share the objective and ultimate goals of this workshop through what we call the introduction to the workshop. Let share the just only 2 or 3 slides related with this share workshop. Okay, so the rationale why do we need this workshop is actually part of our what we call collaborative and common spirit that Indonesia has targeted to include the ocean to the next NDC. Our target, according to the last, for example, Ministry of Forest and Environmental Affairs, for example, targeted to include the ocean sectors as the new sectors by 2024 or at least 2025 maximum. So that's because of the role of the ocean in the climate change is very, very important. And the role of the ocean of climate change is then knowledge in the IPCC as the blue carbon, which is actually consists of 3 important ecosystem: mangrove, seagrass, and salt marsh. But in the context of this ocean and climate, it's not just only based on the blue carbon ecosystem, but also the second one is related to the less carbon development plan or less carbon activities coming from the ocean. But in the context of updating the policies of the ocean inclusion into NDC, we will start with the first domain of the ocean and climate, which is blue carbon ecosystem. In that regards, EPP University as one of the leading university in marine science, including coastal and blue carbon ecosystem, we have to attend, we have to then contribute in the context of the blue carbon ecosystem governance. And this workshop will be used as the context of get some or strengthening the ideas of the blue carbon ecosystem governance, including the total policies, including the context of not only ecology, not only blue carbon ecosystem as ecological features, but also in the context of economics and policies. In that regard, this workshop will explore the 3 main objectives. The first is to explore the prospect and challenges of the blue carbon ecosystem governance, because without a blue carbon ecosystem, there is no blue carbon economy and policies. And then the second one, we will try to get some lesson learned from other international and national experiences related with the carbon economy and policy. That's why that we will have Professor Catherine Lovelock to share the how Australian developed the market mechanism for the blue carbon trade. And then Ibu Mari from Oxford will share how the REDD Plus as the green carbon experience can be used to strengthen and improve the better policy for blue carbon in Indonesia. And also Pak Aan and Dr. Sali will share with the context of blue carbon ecosystem science itself, how then we connect with the context of blue carbon ecosystem science. And last but not least, we will have somehow during the discussion, we will to invite also the next step after the resource person sharing the experience and insight. As moderator or facilitator, I would like to invite all of the participants not only to ask about the what resource persons present, but we also try to invite all the participants to get some ideas on how to explore the next steps of blue carbon policy, especially in the context of the ocean inclusion to the next Indonesian NDC. Ladies and gentlemen, Indonesian government just established or launched the profile of the seagrass as the one of the main features of blue carbon during the ICE, Archipelagic and Island States Forum last 2 or 3 weeks ago in Bali. So that actually this workshop perhaps will be discussing not only mangrove, but also the seagrass, especially because mangrove already put in the context of FOLU, say for example from 1 to 10 mangrove blue carbon already into in this at least 6 or 7 step, for example. But for seagrass, we still very slow, and that's why that we try to strengthen the seagrass blue carbon economy and policy to also get some more speed in the context of the blue carbon ecosystem policy as mangrove already been done. Even though that mangrove not still yet completed, so this discussion will contribute to the context of how to speed up the blue carbon policy, especially for the two mangrove and seagrass ecosystem. Ladies and gentlemen, the rundown, I would like to share that we have Professor Catherine Lovelock from University of Queensland, who will share with us the blue carbon policy experience and challenges in the developing market-based methods in Australia. So Professor Lovelock will share his presence. Thank you very much. Good afternoon in Australia, already malam here, there in the already malam ya, afternoon in Australia. And the next presenter will be, we invite Ibu Dr. Mari Mulyani, one of our diaspora Indonesian scientists working as the associate professor in Oxford University from the School of Geography and Environmental Studies, will present the RED Plus insight for the blue carbon policies Indonesian case. And then I would like to invite Mas Aan Johan Wahyudi as Indonesian permanent scientist in seagrass ecosystem science to explore what is actually the update of the blue carbon ecosystem science in the context of, say, for example, to strengthen the seagrass blue carbon ecosystem policy to fill up in the context of the ocean inclusion for the next NDC. And last but not least, I would like to invite my best friend, my colleagues from Monash University, Dr. Sally Basse, who will present also the experience of the CFOM, one of the engagement of the Monash University in collaboration with several institutions in Indonesia related with the blue carbon ecosystem management and policy. So by that sequence, we will try to do our best to complete all of the workshop before 6 o'clock, because here in Bogor and Jakarta time, we should complete before 6 o'clock, since that the 6 o'clock already the Maghrib praying time. So sorry for that, but anyway, I will do my best to manage the time for that. Okay, so that's all of the introduction of the workshop. Then I would like to invite the first presenters or a resource person. I will try to invite Professor Catherine Lovelock. Professor Lovelock is professor at the University of Queensland. She is a IRC Laureate Fellow and Fellow of the Australian Academy of Science. So it's similar with several our colleagues here that some of our university lecturers or member also part of Indonesian Academy of Science. Her research focused on climate change and its impact on the coastal plain communities, as well as the role of the coastal wetlands in adaptation and climate change mitigation. So she was also lead author of the 2019 IPCC guideline for the national greenhouse gas inventories for the wetland. So I think we invite actually the Professor Catherine Lovelock as a prominent scientist in the field of the blue carbon ecosystem. She also has received the Susan Corey Medal for the Australian Academy of Science in 2023 in the recognition of her outstanding research career. Congratulations, Prof. Catherine Lovelock, for the JAS 2023 award of the Susan Corey Medal of the Australian Academy of Science. So that's the background of our resource person for the first time. I would like to invite then Professor Lovelock to share the experience of Australia in developing the blue carbon trading mechanism. Prof. Catherine, 15 to 20 minutes. Now start from you. Time is yours.
Thank you very much, Pak Luki, and hello to the distinguished guests in the room. It's a great pleasure to speak to you today. Can I share my screen?
Yes, sure. You can share your screen. Is it possible, Mas? Okay, already. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Can you see that? Okay, great. So I'm going to talk to you today about our experience in Australia with creating a market-based mechanism for blue carbon, which means that you can.
Prof. Catherine, actually, from our Zoom screen, your screen is about half, so it's not complete full screen. Maybe stop screen first and then try to share screen again.
Yes. Try this one. Well, is that still bad? Better. Okay, I've got two screens hooked up. That's my problem.
Yeah, still half. Yeah. Okay, right, Prof. Lovelock.
Yeah, just hang on a minute. I'll just try something else.
Yeah,
hey,
it's okay. Just take your time.
Yeah. So
yes.
Is that?
Yes, and then just yes.
Is that better?
Yes, and then just okay. Oh. Still. But can you just back to the not slideshow?
Oh, I know. It's terrible what's happening here. My computer is having trouble.
Maybe you can just start with a non slideshow platform, perhaps, to get a complete screen of your presentation, right?
Okay, can I just try one more time? I'm
sure.
Sorry about this.
Yeah, I think if it's not work, maybe you can just use the non slideshow platform. But okay, this is good. Can you just pick another slide, for example? Next. Okay, that's good. Okay, no problem. Maybe just only the cover, Prof. Catherine.
Okay, all right.
Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm sorry for the delay there. So we want to talk about blue carbon and the creation of a market-based mechanism. And what that means is that you can do a restoration project, create a mangrove that stores carbon, and then basically the person who does the project can sell those tons of carbon that have been stored for to either the government or to industry and obtain finance funds to continue to manage their project. So blue carbon, we all know, is all the carbon that's sequestered in the soils and biomass of mangroves, tidal marshes or salt marshes, seagrass and other ecosystems, and those other ecosystems are actually coming online. The goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from loss and degradation of those ecosystems, because there has been a lot of loss and degradation over time, and to capture CO2 and avoid unwanted emissions through conservation and restoration of coastal wetlands. So that's our goal. So in the process of doing that, the wonderful thing about blue carbon is that we get all these other ecosystem services, including things like support of biodiversity, fisheries, forestry, and other things, right? So the market-based mechanism is really to provide financial incentives for conservation and restoration. And I have to put a caveat here that market-based mechanisms are not always the way to go, right? So this might work in some situations, but not in others. So when we started this journey of creating a market-based method, we started with a scoping exercise, and that actually started a long time ago, where we were looking at different methods and trying to assemble the data for Australia. And then finally, you know, the government got, you know, really committed to this process and started a process of stakeholder consultation. So in that kind of consultation, they asked, what kind of blue carbon activities do you want to do? What sort of approaches would be appropriate? You know, how do the stakeholders really see that blue carbon could work for them? Then after that was sort of done, that process was performed, we assembled the experts and their data and the carbon and the case studies, right? And so the core scientific group was about 14 strong from all states and covering all ecosystems. And then we did this big sprint, you know, this great run to make a method in about a year. And it was an intense collaboration among scientists, governments, with multiple stages of review by both stakeholders and also a committee called the Emission Reduction Assurance Committee, which is interested in only that the Australian market only issues bona fide, as in very strong carbon credits. So the first step was really this evaluation of existing methods and assessment of the consistency with the national inventory. So this is a really important thing for us, you know. Basically, what we did for a blue carbon method had to fit in to the way the Australian government does the greenhouse gas inventory. And they were at the time implementing the 2013 IPCC wetland supplement, or at least parts of it. So we ended up doing a whole lot of work, sort of mapping, you know, where the IPCC supplement, where the Verra, which was the other standard that's available for coastal wetlands, so that's VM0033, and then also other existing methods under what we call the Emission Reduction Fund, which of course is the market, Australia's carbon market. It's now called the Australian Carbon Credit Unit Scheme. So I guess for Indonesia, it's really important that you cover off on other policies, things like REDD+ or the Sustainable Development Goals or other really important pieces of policy. So the next step was really to make a whole bunch of decisions. And this is difficult, right? So we had to decide on things like eligible ecosystems, and the definition of these ecosystems varies among states. So we decided to include almost everything in the coastal zone that was influenced by the tide, and also those that were going to be influenced by sea level rise. So that meant that there's actually a lot of ecosystems in this method. We had to decide on eligible activity, and the government decided that they would go with tidal restoration over and above planting, landward, you know, many other options. And that is because they felt that tidal restoration or hydrological repair really was the most sure additional activity, right? So it was really met that criteria that the market has. Then we had to think about emission factors, which means we had to gather the data. So emission factors are expressed in carbon dioxide equivalents per hectare per year. And sometimes those emissions are linked to carbon stocks. We had to decide on what constituted activity data, like how would we, you know, go forward and measure what the outcomes of tidal restoration. And we had to decide on approaches for calculating carbon abatement or carbon sequestered and emissions avoided. Were we going to use a measured method like the Verra standard, where you have to go out and measure trees, or something that was modelled? And then finally, there's the regulatory components. We needed to decide on all sorts of things, how to deal with land tenure and permits and verification and risks, right? So it's a very complex piece of work. So blue carbon ecosystems in Australia vary regionally. You know, it's not Australia's an island, but basically it's a continent, and we have multiple climate zones. So in the method is seagrass, mangroves, salt marshes, supratidal forests. So these are swamp forests that are at the back of often at landward of the mangroves. And then because of our arid zone, we have sparsely vegetated salt marshes and salt flats. So they had to be in the method as well. So, you know, the idea for the tidal restoration method is that you have a landscape like this. This is degraded sugarcane land that has been drained. It was a wetland in the past. And then we'll do something to this gate, to this tidal gate, and allow the tide back in and thereby restore coastal wetlands. There is no planting or anything else in this method. It's really about the activity of restoring tides. And then if you see the other side of the gate, you can already see the restored mangrove on the other side. So the fact that it's restricted to one activity actually is, it has restricted the opportunity in the landscape. And you can read about the method. It's published in Restoration Ecology and available for download. So the major assumptions about our method are that coastal wetlands comprise a mosaic of multiple ecosystems. So we're anticipating that these will replace each other over time as climate change progresses. So we're going to have maybe mangroves die and seagrass occupy mangrove land, or what was mangroves. And we might have mangroves moving up into salt marshes. So we needed to have a method that basically could account for these potential emissions that occur with transitions expected under sea level rise. Now, with consultation with the stakeholders, we use a modelled approach. So nobody goes out and measures soils or trees. They basically model what the abatement is based on changes in the area of the habitat that you can see from space. So it's very linked to remotely sensed images or images on the ground. And then you basically use a set of equations to calculate your abatement. And it also relies, you know, plant communities are influenced by climate and tidal inundation, and we use elevation often as a proxy for some of the abatement that occurs in soils and vegetation, using something called the Standard Tidal Position Index. So the data sources were collated from all of the studies on carbon that predated, a lot of them predated anything to do with blue carbon. They're just ecologists doing their thing out there and measuring carbon. So we accumulated all of the data that was published in Thurano until 2019. And we developed submodels for each region. We use this regional approach, and this is a regional approach that's used by the Australian government to deliver climate change projections and also other climate-related data. The projects all have to think about what sea level rise is going to do to the landscape and to their as the project proceeds, and actually all of the land that is likely to be influenced by sea level rise by 2100 needs to be in the project. So there's guidelines also on how you do this hydrological assessment, and that's basically used to plan the tidal works and evaluate the risks. So the model is called BlueCam, and you can download that and look at that, you know, as you please. It's this screenshot is of a video that the government has made about the method. So it looks like this on the website and of the government, and it's a piece of legislation, which is part of the reason why that it is so strongly government led. So this is an example. You have this is one of our case studies, a restoration of a salt works, a salt pond. So the tidal gates were modified to allow tidal introduction. And then after 3 years, you can see the development of a salt marsh. So in the carbon world, you can see that there's a baseline period where we can see that it doesn't have any vegetation on it. Then the project starts, and the project reports every 5 years, and they get paid for carbon credits every 5 years for 25 years, but the project should be 100 years, right? So it's going to anticipate perhaps that there's going to be changes in vegetation over that time. So this is another example, one that I'm very familiar with. This is just around Brisbane, north of Brisbane, and we are working towards converting degraded sugarcane land back into wetlands over time. And this is one of 5 government-funded demonstration projects over the country. So one thing that happened with the building of the method is that monitoring and verification was also considered. And in fact, the government invested in a national salt marsh map that we didn't have before as a part of the method. So this sort of, development of technology is also an important component of method development. So I suppose, that's the rush through the method. And now I want to talk about some of the lessons that we learned. And one of them is about the opportunity for implementation. This is really ongoing work because most of the description of the opportunity was based on biophysical characteristics. But of course, we've learned that opportunity is more than biophysical characteristics. It includes all of these social and other economic factors that need to be considered. So this is still a work in progress. And in fact, even other policies are coming to bear on this opportunity as we, Australia, the government is committed to a nature repair market that is about biodiversity. So trying to work out how these interact is going to be quite a challenge. So one of the other things is that I've stressed that we only have one activity, and that's tidal restoration. But really what we had to think about, or at least I've thought about a lot, is that this may not be fair for everybody because not everybody has that kind of land. And in fact, traditional owners, First Nations people, often don't have that kind of land. So it means that actually we're starting work on a range of other methods, right? So there's one that we're working on that's avoiding emissions by removing invasive species, particularly feral pigs and cattle, buffalo. And then also there's a new seagrass method that is under development for planting seagrass, not tidal restoration, but by actually, planting and restoring seagrass. And that's being led by the government of South Australia. So one of the other lessons that we learned is that the data that comes from developing the method was actually useful for many other purposes. So in fact, the Australian government is committed to the Environmental Economic Accounting Framework, and they used the data they used the values, the model from the method to do Australia's first ocean account for mangroves and seagrass. So, the building of the method can have these other sort of like positive benefits to other, in meeting other government commitments, which the environmental economic accounts is a part of the post-2020 CBD commitments. So one of the other things we know is that we've learned is that scaling up blue carbon, so implementation at large scale, really requires bridging the gap between science and policy, which can be quite a chasm, right? So, but the importance is that strong policy signals really, they indicate commitment and they reduce uncertainty for proponents and they encourage action, right? So I suppose, we really have to work hard to try and cross this boundary. One thing is that scientists themselves are an incredibly diverse community, and through method development, I think it's been really important that we've been very inclusive. So we've, from different states, scientists that work on different ecosystems at different career stages, paying attention to gender, all sorts of things. So this is, a big piece that you need to, I think, pay attention to. Blue carbon also spans the interests of multiple government departments, and both state and federal and local. So, there's actually a lot of involvement needed across different levels of government. And I'd also say that implementation takes engagement of many experts, both from science and also from policy. So this is something that I received from Pat Daniel Moriaso about, this is a platform for sharing between scientists and policymakers that CIFOR is developing, and I encourage you to have a look at that. So finally, in conclusion, I think the blue carbon method, as we've developed it, certainly has incentivized restoration projects and generated a lot of interest. It's been key in developing monitoring and verification technologies. It's been important in developing the capacity in science, in policy, in coastal engineering, conservation planning, economics, finance, ecology, and other disciplines. And really, I think what we've given rise to is transdisciplinary scientists. Assessments of opportunity are growing, but we're really learning about things like justice and other factors. And it's also been great for inclusion in reporting on multiple ecosystem services for the government and the private sector. So thank you very much. I know that was a bit rushed, but I did, my computer didn't cooperate in the beginning. So thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Catherine de Vlok. It's very insightful and very important updates on the what Australia. I think it's already been many steps ahead, in comparing in the context of, say, at least in our country, seagrass, for example, Prof. Catherine. Mangrove is okay. We a bit on the progress, but when we talk about the seagrass, for example, from the step 1, step 2, and step 3 that just you explained to us, actually the step 2 and step 3 is still very challenging, especially with the context of, say, blue carbon, seagrass stock. We now still discussing on the area, the uncertainty of the seagrass area. You know that seagrass is very vulnerable and uncertainty area compared to, for example, mangrove, because today we can just have a seagrass in front of our coastal, but then after say half hours, maybe somehow already been disappear, for example, content of that. Thank you, Professor Catherine, for the very insightful presentation. And ladies and gentlemen, participants and both in online and offline, I would like then invite for the next 15 minutes to Dr. Mari Molyani, our diaspora from Oxford University. I will say something. Selamat pagi, Bu Mari. Are you there already in online?
Yes, selamat sore Pak Lucky
sore, ya.
dan
pagi
in Oxford. Yes.
Oxford, yeah. Oh, you very colorful, Bu Mari. You have a blue, red, but not green, right?
Not green.
Okay, so I would like to introduce Dr. Mari Molyani. Is secure her PhD from the University of Oxford School of Geography and the Environment with a dissertation on the climate change mitigation policy, focusing on REDD+ institution. And Ibu Mari actually also has developed and runs an elective module on ASEAN environment for master courses within this school, in Oxford University. And this program explored the complex interplay between the principle of ASEAN politics, society, natural resources, as well as the environmental governance. So in this workshop, Ibu Mari will share with us the experience of REDD+, as also Professor Catherine mentioned another policy including the REDD+, but then how from the experience of REDD+, we can get some strong lesson learned from the blue carbon policy, because you know that actually we should have some lesson learned from the REDD+ or green carbon in the context of this. So Bu Mari, you may take the time for 15 minutes from now.
Sorry, I'm sharing my slide now. But Lucky, I'll try my best for 15 minutes. I may need 20, but I'll try my best to speed up, the whole thing. So, right, let me just do this. Yes, so my delivery will focus, as Prof. Lucky mentioned, on how key challenges faced when implementing REDD+ in Indonesia may inform the continuing development of blue carbon policy in Indonesia. Since Prof. Luki and Prof. Catherine Lovelock have provided us with the key aspects of blue carbon ecosystem, I will go directly to the key aspect of REDD+ mechanism. The implementation of REDD+ globally received mixed views. Many argued for its failure to achieve the intended carbon emission reduction, evident by the relatively small numbers of projects being certified, whilst others highlighted its socio-ecological and economic benefits. Prof. Luki mentioned about my DPhil research from Oxford. The key findings of my own research conducted during the first phase of REDD+ introduction on the interplay between REDD+ mechanism and forest-related institutions in Indonesia highlighted several collateral benefits, even when many challenges were faced. This included an impetus for the One Map policy development to be hastened due to the requirement of clear and transparent forest land maps to implement REDD+ projects and programs. Other contributions of REDD+ initiative included the development and advancement of robust technologies to measure, report, and verify carbon emission reduction, and the extensive promotion of the principles of good governance during all related activities. So I will return to some of the key challenges and characteristics of REDD+ later. But for the benefits of those who are not very familiar with REDD+, here is a brief summary. REDD+, or reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation and enhancing forest carbon stock and conservation, is a major international policy initiative that emerged from the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, first introduced during the Conference of the Party, COP11, in 2005 in Montreal, and it was designed initially as a market-based instrument to drive large-scale fundings to provide developing countries with financial incentives to produce measurable reduction in carbon emissions beyond what would have occurred without REDD+, so the concept of additionality. Current debate includes how emission reductions through blue carbon ecosystems can be incorporated within the REDD+ mechanism. So in 2010, the Cancun Agreement outlined a phased approach. Firstly, the development of REDD+ national strategies and action plans, including capacity building, followed by the implementation of national policies involve further capacity building, technology development and transfer, and also results-based demonstration activities. And thirdly, results-based actions that should be fully measured, reported, and verified. So, as well as the development of a national REDD+ strategy, host countries such as Indonesia need to establish a national reference emission level and a robust and transparent national monitoring system. Specifically, I would like to draw your attention on the process for establishing the REDD+ national strategy, which I believe inform the improvement of blue carbon strategy. So REDD+ was designed in the context of global forest loss, which in 2007 was estimated to generate between 17 and 20% of anthropogenic greenhouse gas emission. The mechanism itself was expected not only as emission reduction instrument, but also as a means to improve forest governance. Indonesia at the time was estimated to have the potential to reduce up to 120 million tons of CO2 equivalent per year. As shown on this diagram, with that potential, in its early development, REDD+ attracted a large number of policy networks, including the UN REDD+ program, which was formed by the UNFAO, UNDP, and UNEP to assist host countries to build national REDD+ architecture through, importantly, the promotion of principles of fairness, equity, transparency, and meaningful public participation. Indonesia's office was opened with a budget of $5.6 million. Indonesia, as many of you are aware, also received a pledge from Norway of $1 billion based on performance, as well as Australian government provided 46, I believe, Australian dollar for the demonstration activity in Central Kalimantan. Key ministers such as then the Ministry of Forestry, Ministry of Environment, and National Planning Agency, or Bappenas, were also involved, as well as advocacy coalitions such as WWF, Nature Conservancy, and Conservation International, amongst others. Civil society and Indigenous People Community Alliance were also involved in the policy-making process of REDD+ national strategy. So the whole process, argued by many, have opened up greater space for dialogue amongst government ministries and also between them and specialist experts with NGOs. Thereby, different actors advocated their agendas, and the belief is that by doing so, the legitimacy of both policy-making process and the resulting policy document increased. In the process, 114 written inputs from diverse stakeholders were received, and many of the inputs were incorporated within the national strategy document. So the process was regarded by many as highly transparent. However, significant challenges were faced, including the then President Yudhoyono's decision in 2010 to create an independent REDD+ task force that was mandated with preparing the national REDD+ infrastructure and coordinating all related activities was not well received by existing ministries. I see in our audience, actually, we have one of our REDD+ experts, Dr. Mubarak Ahmad, who also very well involved in the process. So other perceived challenges can be seen on this slide, resulting from my interviews with 60 policy stakeholders at the national level and 80 key informants at the subnational, district, and village level. So whilst my own study was conducted in 2012 at the early stage of REDD+ policy development, its key findings are similar to Ayostina et al. 2022, of which actually Prof. Murdiarso also involved in the study on blue carbon policy in Indonesia, and I will return to this at the end of my presentation. So in short, my study identified 7 perceived challenges, including coordination issues amongst government ministries and agencies, lack of local capacity to implement REDD+, risk of corruption, complexity of REDD+ methodologies, as well as uncertainty over the future of international climate change agreement that had effects on market demand and price for carbon, generating the whole negative perception on the economic viability of REDD+. Other challenges related to the ambiguity of legal systems surrounding forests and overlapping authorities, also highlighted by study of Ituarte et al. 2014, which outlined Indonesia's legal framework that were established to implement REDD+. So Challenges relate to the complexity of REDD+ methodologies, the lack of local capacity, uncertainty of future climate agreement, and the notion of carbon colonialism can be illustrated on this slide. So some of you are experienced in the market of carbon market and REDD+ development. Establishing the project is complex, involving project design, validation, registration, monitoring, verification, certification, and the issuance of certified emission reduction, which can then be traded in the compliance or voluntary carbon market. The host countries, such as Indonesia, must establish national accrediting authorities to certify that projects meet the standard requirements relating to the concepts of additionality and baseline. The whole process can take 2 years or more, and criticism have been directed towards this mechanism, including that it has been governed predominantly by international actors which hold the relevant technical knowledge. It is geared more towards producing marketable carbon credits rather than changing the behavior of emitters. REDD+ mechanism was also labeled as a form of carbon colonialism, whereby developed countries exploit the carbon abatement potential of the developing countries to maintain its own standard of living. I suggest that the blue carbon community needs to ponder how these challenges and criticism can be addressed or minimized. However, whilst various challenges were faced, collateral benefits were also evident. The rigorous process that was designed to safeguard the integrity of the environment and emission reductions led to the development of standards to measure and report countries' baseline of greenhouse gas emissions, and hence data improvement for the purpose of mitigation and adaptation of climate change. Moreover, the employment of local people and the indigenous community also occurred, since many of them were involved in the establishment of REDD+ projects and programs implementation. So we have witnessed a plethora of policy and governance networks. Private and public investors are required to finance projects design. Developers are required to bring projects to the market. NGOs and epistemic communities to develop and spread information and the know-how. The UN regulates and runs the accrediting bodies and the registry administrators and the national governments to pass laws and regulation that facilitates new markets. So just briefly, one other key point on which the blue carbon community must focus relates to the appropriate design of the benefit sharing mechanism to ensure that local communities can gain access to fair benefits from the relevant policies and projects. This article presented my key findings from the establishing process of a contractual agreement between 9 villages and the REDD+ pilot project developer, in this case, the Kalimantan Forest Climate Partnership funded by the Australian government. And the contractual agreement formed in village agreement developed the general principles, rights and responsibilities in the collaboration, including how payments would be made to community involved in emission reduction related activities. An important lesson learned is that it took more than 12 months through an extensive participatory process which sought to ensure all stakeholders were involved. Again, the blue carbon community ought to account for this lengthy time as well as other challenges. I will not be able to discuss each of these points, but I suggest that similar challenges on the ground should be expected during the future implementation of blue carbon programs and/or project. But in short, whilst the agreement or village agreement appropriately incorporated villagers' concern and interests, including a strong emphasis on full and effective participation and equality in REDD+ benefit sharing, key challenges, as shown on this slide, were observed. Most notable was the gap of knowledge. So the combination of the new concepts of carbon, climate change, greenhouse gas, and villagers' relatively low level of education, as well as the limited capacity of local REDD+ facilitators, impeded the process for achieving a full understanding and the purpose of REDD+. This diagram shows that only a small portion of REDD+ projects were viable for registration. Until 2015, when REDD+ was expected to be at the implementation stage, there were only 57 projects registered globally, largely because the length and complexity to register and validate the projects, compounded by the lack of local capacities at that time. Similar changes were found in other studies from host countries such as Cambodia, Vietnam, Papua New Guinea, African countries, and Central as well as South America. By 2020, there were 155 active projects globally covering 50.2 million hectares, of which 18 projects are in Indonesia, covering over 5.9 million hectares. So, whilst many analysts argued that REDD+ has failed to achieve its overall emission reduction objectives, others presented a more positive outlook, including the contribution of REDD+ projects to reducing an average of 3.67 ton CO2 equivalent per hectare annually, implemented in 56 countries, as well as the resulting impacts on socio-ecological conservation and restoration efforts. So, almost to the end, this slide shows the perceived challenges in implementing REDD+ and blue carbon in Indonesia. Both studies were conducted at the early stage of relevant policy development. As we can see, coordination issues amongst government ministries and agencies, the lack of local capacity, ambiguity of relevant legal system appeared as common themes. These insights provide further evidence that blue carbon policy stakeholders should allocate significant attention and resources to addressing the inherent forest and ocean governance problem. Moreover, a recent study conducted by the Indonesian Ocean Justice Initiative on blue carbon ecosystem governance also highlighted the absence of integrated policies as one of the key challenges to govern blue carbon ecosystem. Here are the key legal instruments that govern blue carbon. Those highlighted in red directly affect the governance of blue carbon ecosystems, while others provide broader legal infrastructure for carbon emission reduction. Several policy documents are still in the establishment process, including the roadmap for blue carbon-based emission reduction by the Ministry of Maritime Affairs, supported by the UNDP. Disclaimer, whilst I conducted intensive research on REDD+ governance, my involvement in blue carbon policy is new. The research team led by Prof. Luki investigates, amongst others, the types of policies and legal instruments required for blue carbon conservation and restoration to be successful. Whilst this research is still in its infancy, evident already is the risk of overlapping authorities and competing interests amongst government ministries due to the existing legal framework through which different blue carbon ecosystems are governed. I close my delivery with this slide with a window of opportunity for blue carbon solution. The recent revision of the verified carbon standard REDD+ methodology framework adds blue carbon activities as eligible projects. This provides an impetus, I would argue, for the rise of broad coastal wetland conservation and restoration project. Moreover, the global carbon market reached 270 billion US dollar annually in 2021 from government mandated schemes such as EU emission trading and 2 billion US dollar annually from the voluntary carbon markets. The voluntary carbon market value growth has quadrupled since 2020, driven by acceleration of nature-based solution trading volume. We have also in the audience Bapak Kirk Evans, the CEO of PT Zero Carbon Indonesia, who is an expert practitioner on carbon credit markets and has been involved since CDM and REDD+ in Indonesia was introduced 20 plus years ago. So should questions relevant to carbon market be raised during Q&A, I welcome his valuable practitioner insights. To this end, I suggest that blue carbon holds the promise to contribute to the mitigation and adaptation of climate change. Its potential is estimated to contribute between 3 and 7% of current global CO2 annual abatement. Indonesia's blue carbon storage is estimated to be 70% of the global stock. However, challenges remain high. So whilst the potential abatement costs of blue carbon would be viable at around $18 per ton of CO2 equivalent, the average carbon price in the voluntary carbon market is between 5 and 15 US dollar per ton, although it can reach up to 40 and 100 per ton of CO2 per ton of CO2 equivalent in the EU compliance market. So we can all hope through the coming COP28, which I believe Dr. Sally will mention, global and collective political will is paramount for the mainstreaming of the blue carbon economy within the climate mitigation and adaptation measures to be materialized. Thank you for listening.
Dr. Luki, I think you're on mute.
Check. I think now it's okay, right? Yes, thank you, Bu Mari. Well, I just to connect what Professor Catherine Lovelock mentioned related with the context of the implementation of blue carbon policies, including, for example, like tenures, regulatory assessment, etc., etc. And then Bu Mari also addressed the context of how we aware with the context of the carbon colonialism. And that also part of our study, Bu Mari, later on with you, in the context of the group of research between BRIN, IPB University, and also Oxford University for the next start from this year, and then will be and in the 2024. So I think this will be part of the challenge of blue carbon policy. Thank you very much for very insightful and full of spirit how to get some lesson learned from red plus to the blue carbon. Thank you, Bu Mari. Okay, so we have another 30 minutes or perhaps less to now. I would like to invite Mas Aan Johan Wahyudi, as also Prof. Catherine Lovelock mentioned the step of blue carbon policy, step 1, 2, 3, and then perhaps in this workshop, I would like to invite Mas Aan to explore the step 2 and 3 related with the context of the carbon abatement and also the data related with the especially seagrass, because as I mentioned previously, seagrass compared to mangrove, seagrass is a bit less progress in the context of the blue carbon policy. In that context, I would like to invite Mas Aan to explore the state of the art of the blue carbon seagrass ecosystem in the context of the national blue carbon policies. Dr. Aan Johan Wahyudi is a senior research scientist in the Research Center for Oceanography, or in our Indonesian terminology, PRO-BRIN, yeah. The National Research and Innovation Agency, or BRIN. He also the CISAF Postdoctoral Fellow of the ASEAN School of the Environment in the Nanyang Technology University, Singapore, or called NTU of Singapore. Dr. Aan Johan Wahyudi completed a PhD in Sustainable Environmental Studies from University of Tsukuba, Japan. And all of Indonesian college and scientists know Dr. Aan Johan Wahyudi is one of the leading scientists in the seagrass, including in the context of the carbon studies. So it's not just only seagrass ecosystem scientist, but he also focusing on the carbon aspects of the seagrass. Pak Aan, hopefully 15 minutes can be managed by you. You may start the presentation.
Thank you, Pak Lucky. So I hope you can hear my voice well and see my slide. All right. To follow up the previous two speakers, that I want to update the progress of blue carbon science in Indonesia. And actually, this slide is prepared by Frida and my colleagues and me during the workshop in China a couple days ago, and it's still relevant to be presented here according to the theme of the workshop. So yes, as mentioned by Prof. Lucky, that seagrass ecosystem is still under progress of the study. Now we recording the total area of seagrass in Indonesia is 200, about almost 300,000 hectares, but actually the potential estimate could be more than 800,000 hectares, and it's still within the 22 provinces, but now we have 38 provinces, so still have some provinces that doesn't, the seagrass area is not recorded yet. And that's why also the largest seagrass meadow in Indonesia are also still unknown in where is the meadow. And regarding the mangrove, we have 3.3 million hectares within the 34 provinces in 257 regencies, and the largest mangrove forest is in Papua, which is including West Papua, Rio, and East Kalimantan. And now regarding the conservation or protection of the blue carbon ecosystem, that's because of the Indonesia is rich with blue carbon ecosystem, but this ecosystem actually declining. So as for the mangrove forest, the threat is that including illegal logging, deforestation, for land conversion, including aquaculture, human settlement, etc., and also coastal reclamation and coastal erosion. As for seagrass, the threats consist of coastal reclamation, sedimentation, coastal and marine pollution, and also unsustainable mariculture. This is the we are facing now. And the current condition regarding the degradation is that 53% of coastal in Indonesia in critical condition, 455 damaged small island, and then for mangrove is in critical condition is about 29,000 more hectares, and seagrass in poor condition is 123,000 hectares. And but yeah, following up to this kind of degradation, though Indonesia have target to expand the marine protected area until 2030 about 10%, and until 2045 about 30%. So Indonesia will implement coastal and small island management to do that. And yeah, this is marine protected area that I mentioned. Now we have 166 MPA under Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries, 30 MPA under Ministry of Environment and Forestry. And regarding the blue carbon in Indonesia, we have the milestone that started in 2009 when the blue carbon, the first blue carbon term is introduced to science and science community, and we start the research in 2010, and then until 2020 we try to put the blue carbon to be policy issue, and then this year in 2023 blue carbon eligible for finance, and also we have blue carbon database and blue carbon national secretariat, and we targeted that as mentioned previously that actually for mangrove ecosystem is already included within the NDC through the forestry aspect, and then within the second NDC on 2025, perhaps the Ministry of Environment and Forestry that is have the mandate to do the obligatory reporting about the NDC will probably including seagrass, and that's why the Ministry of Marine Affairs as the data guardians of the seagrass right now is working hard to do that. And for the national determined contribution that we have already multi-sectoral contribution, and mangrove forest is already included in forestry and peatland. And this is our target, that 32% with national effort and 43% with international effort. And then 7 development agenda already including here improving environment, increasing disaster and climate resilience, and also implemented as promoting low carbon development, and then manage to low carbon coast and marine as the blue carbon area, that is coastal and marine ecosystem inventory and rehabilitation. So this is a part of low carbon development initiative in Indonesia, and set as an inclusive development planning policy and low carbon investment strategy for the RPJMN 2020 until 2024. And regarding the blue carbon research, yeah, we have many research starting from 2010, but yeah, for seagrass ecosystem still in the progress. The main theme or the focus right now is regarding seagrass, still many things that we have to do, including stock assimilation, sequestration, and emission, because of the different environmental condition, and we lack data in the western part of Indonesia, and also the habitat extent, which is the total area of seagrass, is still in the debate. Which one is the correct number, and also remote sensing approach is needed for this, and including because of the challenge in the properties of the water column and substrate, and then multi-seasonal variability. And for seagrass restoration as one of the activity that can be considered as the climate change mitigation in this kind of blue carbon aspect, is that we need to do this kind of research because yeah, new technology or new approach regarding seagrass seeding, and then success rate and additionality for blue carbon project, and etc. As for mangrove, as it's already, yeah, we can say it's more advanced than seagrass blue carbon, but still we need to some of the in the context of research, some of the topic is catch the eyes of the researcher, including stock assimilation, sequestration, especially regarding emission factor, sequestration rate in the sediment, and then greenhouse gas other than CO2 like methane, nitro oxides, and etc. And also rapid assessment or fast assessment regarding the habitat extent and habitat change using the remote sensing, UAV approach for habitat mapping, and also mangrove blue carbon versus SLR, and etc. And the another thing that I want to emphasize here, that blue carbon, yeah, habitat in Indonesia is very diverse, high species diversity, high variability on environmental conditions. So how does carbon stock vary over different systems or spatial temporal scales? It's also catch the eyes of the researcher. And the second is what factors do influence the variability, and to what extent is carbon emission in seagrass and mangrove habitat. So yeah, still many research have to do regarding this kind of research question. But yes, of course, we got this progress that in 2020, we can estimate the above ground, below ground standing stock of seagrass meadows in Indonesia within the nationally, the first national record of the seagrass carbon stock and seagrass assimilation, carbon assimilation through biomass. And this is I think the progress that we can consider. And also we now for seagrass ecosystem, there is emission factor that we can estimate linked to the carbon stock, initial carbon stock, that we use the constant that Professor Lovelock mentioned in one of her paper previously to estimate this kind of country-specific emission factor in seagrass ecosystem. And the another thing is that we try to estimate the carbon offset regarding the marine protected area versus area that doesn't have a marine protected area, and we can estimate the carbon emission reduction through the activity of marine protected area or conservation activities for seagrass ecosystem as well. And this is because the numbers and for the detail you may look at the papers. And as for seagrass, as for the mangrove forest, Indonesia already got the advanced national carbon inventory here, and including the dynamic hydrogeomorphic geomorphic setting and land use change, which is the undisturbed mangrove and aquaculture conversion, and extra. It has the different numbers regarding the carbon inventory. And also for the recent papers, that emission factor for mangrove blue carbon ecosystem in Indonesia also already draw attention of the national or international researcher. And now this publication by Prof. Daniel Murdiarso that mentioned about the emission factor for mangrove blue carbon ecosystem, I think it's a good progress to note that later mangrove forest and seagrass as well can be noted as one of part of the NDC. And this is another research progress regarding the tidal reinstatement of pond, and then the source of carbon in mangrove sediment, soil carbon sequestration, and within this kind of research, the researcher conclude that many components of the carbon cycle of the mangrove have been restored within 10 years since the re-establishment of the mangrove. And as for the blue carbon restoration, is that we also manage such kind of project or activities to restore the mangrove forest, and then seagrass restoration, including transplantation, experiment using seeds, and combination of transplantation and seeds. And this kind of approach can now under research, and we need still more proof to use this kind of approach to be implemented in such kind of restoration activities as climate change mitigation. And some of the research and studies also engage with the society and finance, but we need still needs gaps of blue carbon research and practice. For example, for scientific support is need to mainstreaming blue carbon climate policy, and then activating existing regulatory framework. And the second, establishing regulatory framework for blue carbon in NDC, including carbon market, and also developing community-based climate mitigation by including livelihood and biodiversity in blue carbon strategy. And for the several steps that mentioned by Professor Lovelock previously, that we need to get the data information more regarding the emission factor, activities for mitigation and adaptation that can be considered as the carbon dioxide removal, and approach or methodology to do better assessment, better estimates, and to get also baseline data, and also MREV method, measure reportable and viable method to do the blue carbon to be able to be used in the NDC. And the need for blue carbon science and technology and innovation, and right now in this the present progress is that first is technology and innovation for seagrass mapping, because we need in a hurry, because of if we have target that 2025 will include seagrass to be part of the NDC, then we need to know at least the close estimate of the seagrass area in Indonesia according to province and etc. And then we also need to know the flux measurement regarding organic carbon, carbon dioxide, and probably methane, and carbon sequestration assessment, and then macroalgal blue carbon potential, and including potential of biological carbon pump. And to closing my presentation, that now we adapted from Howard, the recent publication, that the activities of blue carbon compared to the other carbon dioxide removal, still that blue carbon activities like restoring on protection of mangrove, tidal marshes, seagrass is still in the leading regarding the scientific understanding and mitigation impact. So it will be mangrove, tidal marsh, and seagrass will be more feasible comparing to other carbon dioxide removal. And thank you very much for listening, and good evening.
Tuck your microphones off again.
Test. Okay. Yes, thank you, Mas Aan. Yes, I believe that from Mas Aan presentation, we have like a gap challenges, including also the opportunity of science and technology related with the blue carbon. And if I may add the gap of the science for especially the seagrass and mangrove blue carbon policies related with the context of policies, economics, and social research. As mentioned by Professor Catherine Lovelock, the implementation will be also need some of the research on social and economic aspect. And together with that, actually, now our team with Oxford, with Ibu Mari, try to develop the social ecological system of blue carbon research funded by LPDP. I lead that team, and then hopefully this research can add as a complementary research related with the social ecological aspect of the blue carbon. And Pak Aan mentioned that not only the context of ecosystem services based on ecological function and structure that we need to be more explore on technology and data, but then how we can tackle with the mitigation policy on implementation. In that context, the economics and social aspect of the blue carbon need to be explored later on. Thank you, Mas Aan, for updating us the science of blue carbon. And last but not least, I would like to invite Dr. Sally Bache from the Monash Universities. But before that, I would like to get a bit extending time. I know that the Yes, thank you. Sorry for the a bit technical things. So my voice clear, Sally, right? Yeah, okay. Dr. Sally Bache is the Monash University in UNFCCC delegation and pavilion coordinator for the COP28 next in Qatar, Dubai. She was previously responsible for establishing ocean program at the Climate Work Center, think tank, and her works focus on the Asia Pacific region. She actually has a background as me, as ocean governance and social ecological system. That's why that I'm very close with Sally related with how to complete the science of the blue carbon, not only in the context of the ecological carbon flux things, but also how to deal with the context of governance policy of this blue carbon, especially the context of the seagrass ecosystem governance. So Sally, I think this time is very limited. I hope that you can manage 15 minutes from now. Dr. Sally Basse, time is yours.
Thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sure. Clear.
Yeah, I think so. Great. Excellent. Thank you. I just want to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that I'm joining you from, who are the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and to pay my respect to their elders past and present, and recognise their long connection, both land and the sea. As Pakaluki said, I work in the interface of ocean science and ocean governance, and more recently also in climate change. I'm expanding a little bit from our story of blue carbon today, and I want to take us back a step and look at other ocean interactions and aspects as well. So just by way of background and context, I guess, the ocean absorbs about 93% of the heat that humans generate. It's one of the leading reasons that we have sea level rise, where we've got warm water expanding. It also contributes to deoxygenation and a whole lot of other problems. We also have an ocean that's absorbing carbon dioxide. 30% of it is absorbed. My apologies. 30% of it is absorbed by the ocean. And unlike when these elements are absorbed in the soil or other areas, it's not a null game. There are a lot of impacts. And because of this, we tend to paint the ocean as a victim of climate change. However, several years ago, a report was commissioned by the High Level Panel for a Sustainable Ocean Economy. And what that really did was to shift our contemplation of the ocean from a victim of climate change to part of the solution of climate change. When we take this perspective of the ocean as a solution and we start having a bit of a look at where can we do activities that will actually shift things, Indonesia is an obvious place to look. So Indonesia, as you would all know, is a rapidly developing country. It's got an enormous ocean personality. Indonesia, from the very early stages of the Law of the Sea negotiation, took a really front foot, a really leading role. Geographically, as a country of islands, it's the largest archipelagic state in the world, and it's really taken that seriously in its role in the international community. Aiding in this is the significant portion of it, both GDP and food, that are sourced from the ocean. So valuing this major role as a maritime player, Interface is really interesting when you look at climate change, because Indonesia is also in the top 10 of the world's emitters in terms of greenhouse gases. So the recent commitments that Indonesia's made through the G20 being for ocean, and then as its leadership as ASEAN chair and its plans for the sustainable blue economy, both within its own country, but also as part of ASEAN, really indicate a strong area where it can pursue climate efforts as well as ocean efforts alongside each other. So recognizing that the ocean has a huge impact for mitigation, and that Indonesia is a country that has a great opportunity, we embarked upon a project called SEAFOAM, which stands for the Southeast Asian Framework for Ocean Action and Mitigation. Guntur Sutiono, who's also here today, was my Indonesian co-lead on this, and Pak Luki was very kind to act as the chair of our stakeholder steering group, which were, vital elements in the execution of this work. The first phase was finished in September of this year, and the team is going on with the second phase. What we did is we looked at the aspects that make up mitigation of emissions in the ocean. We broadly defined mitigation to include sequestration, and blue carbon was a major aspect, obviously looking at mangroves and seagrasses, but also seaweed. We looked at opportunities for offshore energy across its various forms of wind, but also the more nascent forms of offshore energy like wave and tidal. And we looked at shipping and transport and freight and passenger transport as well, to examine where there were mitigation opportunities, but also to acknowledge that when you look at the ocean, it's a different context to when you're looking on land. You are looking at common property resources, you're looking at areas where there isn't individual ownership, but often group ownership and licensing arrangements. And you are looking at a very liquid and fluid environment. We did SEAFOAM as a mapping exercise. This is, I'm not going to talk you through all of our data. It's a large project and it's available on the ClimateWorks website. But this is an indication of the sort of work we did. So we looked at where there were ferry routes. We looked at where they were not suitable for electrification, largely due to the distance that was needing to be travelled in those routes, and where there were large commuter passengers which would be suitable for electrification. Just to put it in the context, there are 10 more million passenger voyages by ferry in Indonesia each year than there are by air. So decarbonisation of the ferry routes is going to be more impactful significantly than decarbonisation internally of the airlines. Another example of the sort of work we did is we looked at, this is where offshore offshore wave energy would be viable. But we also looked at the interactions, so where opportunities might exist that do not conflict with marine protected areas unless they could be multi-use zones, or where, through what we now know from all the other speakers today, is a really preliminary assessment, recognising where there might be blue carbon concerns or ecosystems that they might conflict with. And obviously we're still forming a full map of where those ecosystems exist, so we recognise that this work was really early work. But what we did in doing this is we were able to come up with an estimation of the annual mitigation potential mapped against Indonesia's low carbon compatible scenario. So because the low carbon compatible scenario is the one that Indonesia benchmarks itself against, this is the one that we've used. It's a net zero by 2060 goal with a target of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees as per the terms within the Paris Agreement. As with most countries, the actions that they're taking aren't sufficient to meet the goals that they've expressed, and therefore the ocean is an area where a lot more of those goals that they've been expressed can be met. In fact, by 2030, it was found that an extra 19% of the gap needed to meet Indonesia's ambitions could come from the ocean. Is because of the time delay in implementation and the regulatory readiness. It's not actually that the technology isn't there so much. As you can see in 2050, there's a really decent portion of what we estimate would be the annual mitigation potential that would come from offshore energy, adding to that of blue carbon. We used this to look ahead at the policy elements. So this is where, we contemplate what are the options for implementation of this new knowledge that we have. We recommended that a really strong consideration be the creation of a 6th new ocean use and ocean change sector within Indonesia's NDC. There's a lack of regulatory clarity in a few areas in Indonesia. I think a good example is probably that there's a fragmented jurisdiction between different agencies when it comes to mangroves and who's responsible, whether they're forestry, whether they're marine. And that is a really good reflection of the international complexities. At the moment, under the emission inventories, we rely on land use change, and forestry. And whilst ocean at the moment is being slotted into there are some real problems with doing that. One of them is that there is a lot of long-term data for many countries on forestry and terrestrial land use change and the related emissions. Professor Lovelock mentioned this in her presentation. And if we suddenly introduce a whole new geographic area that we haven't looked at very much within that, that's really going to undermine the consistency of that data and the comparability over a time frame. So the recommendation of a new ocean use and ocean change sector removes that problem, and it allows blue carbon to be contemplated in its own space. In other areas, we recommended that a system for offshore energy decision making and development be created that gives some sort of regulatory certainty. Also, there's a real opportunity in Indonesia because not much of the Southeast Asian region has taken this step for creating a competitive economic advantage in being able to move forward and export to the region knowledge in these areas. So some large scale pilot programs in potentially wave or tidal energy could be very useful, both to the country itself, but also to its neighbours, its ASEAN partners. We also looked at the IMO goals, including the more recent updated goals of this year, and suggested that they be adhered to both internationally, but also that domestic targets be applied that are aligned to these. We also recognised that there is an absolute lack of information, which has been repeated here, both with seagrasses, to an extent with mangroves, certainly with fluxes and things like that, as was just talked about, but also in understanding seaweed production and the different pros and cons of seaweed production and what will happen in different areas where that goes ahead, because the Indonesian government has a target for increased seaweed production moving forward. The other areas there we saw real priority for more knowledge is that of bottom disturbance and more broadly fisheries sector emissions. So when I say bottom disturbance, I'm talking about sand mining as well as, trawling and dredging. There's also a lack of available data and consistently recorded data into domestic maritime emissions. So that's another area for focus. Finally, on a global scale, we need improved methodologies, but more than that, we need a mandated consideration of blue carbon in national emission inventories. When forestry was first introduced into emission inventories, measures of equivalence were used at a much earlier stage than we seem comfortable doing in the offshore space. And that's delaying any collection of information and reporting of information, no matter how preliminary that reporting is. We need, obviously, a systemic inclusion of oceans in NDCs and in long-term strategies, marrying those up with things like the economic assessments that have been done in Australia, but also they're starting to happen in Indonesia at quite a pace. And also linking those in with marine spatial planning and sustainable blue economy planning, because these also need to be done in concert with each other. We need increased recognition broadly within the climate change area of the potential of ocean-based mitigation. We need a proportion of climate finance to be blue finance, or else this action just isn't possible. Some of this has moved forward, largely within the UN system. It's moved forward under the Ocean and Climate Change Dialogue. It's a slow-moving beast. It started off with countries will have a dialogue. It moved along to countries will have an annual dialogue. It's now moved along to countries will have an annual dialogue, and the dialogue will consider how oceans can be included in NDCs. But more action-based behaviour is needed to be precipitated within this area. So thank you for having me today, and back to you, Pakluki.
Thank you, Sally, for your very good presentation related with the updates. As I mentioned, the second aspects of the blue carbon or ocean inclusion is not only the ecosystem services base, but also the less or low carbon emission development plan. And you mentioned updating, for example, like the blue energy sector or transportation sector or other fisheries emission thing that related to the context of ocean inclusion. That's also part of our, in my personal concern, still the next step of the ocean inclusion, Sally, after, for example, the blue carbon ecosystem service-based policy done already. So maybe the next NDC, we will include the context of seagrass and mangrove as blue carbon policy, but then we next to the context of less or low carbon development plan, as also mentioned by Pak Aan just now. So thank you, Sally, for update that. And you also mentioned about the ocean and climate change dialogue. That's also very important to be addressed, especially in our blue. I use a Bumari terminology of blue carbon community. Yes, indeed, we need that one in the context of how we strengthen the action base of the OECD ocean and climate change dialogue related with the context of the next our standing point related with this blue carbon. Thank you very much for that. So, ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, now come to the discussion. I know that the time is very limited. Now already 17:52 in my clocks, a bit already Maghrib praying time, but I have to a bit extend the time, maybe 15 minutes for discussion. I will invite the participant who attending this workshop offline. We have Dr. Imam Mustafa, the Marine Program Director of WWF Indonesia. That also I know very well that WWF is also concerned with the context of the blue carbon policy, especially in the context of the blue carbon ecosystem thing. I will invite him to give some question and comments. And after this, I would like to also invite 1 or 2 or 3 participants in online to give some question or comment. I know Pak Mubarik hopefully still here. The friends of Bumari and the others colleges from all of the institution, I believe still here to maybe give some comment. I will give you 1 or 2 opportunity for that. So yes, Mas Imam, I think I give you first opportunities. Go ahead, Mas Imam.
Thank you, Pak Luki, for give me first chance for comment and question. I think and thanks for all the panelists for the very good presentation. I think this is also many new knowledge for me itself, and happy to sitting in here to listening all of your great presentation. So I think I'm very interesting to the thing about the seaweed, because what I hear, even some of the panelists talk a little bit more, but other is just mentioned. But I think all the panelists mentioned about seaweed thing, and in my perspective, that seaweed in Indonesia maybe is part of the big game also for the blue carbon strategy in Indonesia. But I would like to get the insight from all the panelists about what the seaweed experiences maybe in your scenario of the blue carbon strategy. How about the potential? How big the potential actually seaweed part of the sequestering or restoring in their biomass, maybe if you have experiences on that, and maybe about the calculation, maybe, and also if you also start thinking about how to incentivize, because from my data information from the website that Indonesia has a 9.12 million ton production year annually, and if I was not mistaken, this is one of the biggest producing country in the world for in terms of the seaweed. So that's I would like to get the information about this, and I think Indonesia have many seaweed farmer, and this most of them small scale, and in some area that they work, this become like what you call it, important livelihood for this kind of coastal community with a low technology and capital as well. And for Prof. Catherine, I think I have I have one question. I'm very interesting when you mentioned about the to create the strategy of blue carbon. There is a gap between science to policy. Based on your perspective, what most critical gap actually? And if so, then how to fill the gap, and maybe a recommendation to take action on that kind of the gap. I would like to hear about that, and maybe it's very important for us like WWF to support it maybe in the future, or part of the this kind of the thing. And Ibu Sally from Monash University, I think based on your presentation, I also would like to hear about what exactly maybe from your recommendation that become the low-hanging fruit for Indonesia to do think about the blue carbon, and maybe it's become a significant contribution for Indonesia. I think that's all from my question and comment, Pak Lucky. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mas Imam. 3 questions: seaweed, science and policy gaps, and the lowest hanging fruit related with the blue carbon policy Indonesia. And I think for the seaweed, I would like to invite perhaps first Mas Aan, Johan Wahyudi from BRIN, to give some insight related with the seaweed. I know some of the students, especially in my lab, has conducted want to study on the seaweed and the blue carbon, including the team that we get grant from Pak Mubarik and the Faculty of Physics and Marine Science. There's also a group of the young economists from Hasanuddin University also doing this one on seaweed and blue carbon economics. So that will be maybe we can do some share on that. And for the next question of the science and policy gap, Prof. Catherine Lovelock, I would like to invite you to respond, and as well as the Bu Sally related with the lowest hanging fruit of the blue carbon policy Indonesia. So I invite another respond or comment or question from the online. Maybe you can just open the mic or unmute your mic directly. Pak Mubarik, maybe you interest with the blue colonialism, anti-blue colonialism, because you are I think very interested with the governance of this blue economy. Blue carbon. Yeah, including of course blue economy. I would like to invite you, Pak Mubarik, to respond what actually Bu Mari mentioned about the blue colonialism. Also, I would like to invite Mbak Mauludia Quatrum. Oh, the name is very difficult to spell. Quatrotun, ya. Okay, Maulidia, ya. Mbak Mauludia already raised hand, and then Bu Mauludia, of course, I would like to invite you to share directly the question. I think start with Pak Mubarik, and then Ibu Mauludia. Pak Mubarik.
Okay. Thank you so much, Pak Lucky. Congratulations to you, Pak Lucky, Mari, and all the other speakers. Excellent and up-to-date presentations. I'm really enjoying all the materials presented. I think, well, perhaps it's probably more productive not to comment, but perhaps just giving sharing some updates. Maybe I missed, somebody might have mentioned it, but I think I missed it if it's been mentioned. So there's an update and there is a question and maybe suggestion from me. In terms of update, perhaps all the researchers here are aware that the Indonesia has issued the regulations on the national registry for carbon system. And then with that, it's also contain contain the rules for benefit sharing. So the rules of benefit sharing was the one that is putting a hurdle seriously in the past that makes all these things getting delayed significantly. That's part of my view on this issue. And what we are seeing with this new regulation is that government is saying that, okay, as long as the land is clean and clear in terms of legal status, as long as there is a management unit, then get your act together and then register the project with National Registry, and then for when the carbon is certified, then government will only take 20% of it, and then that 20% will be used to fill in the NDC. So that's one aspect that is, I think, boosting a new spirit, a new enthusiasm in developing carbon project in Indonesia. The second one is that the fact the government has recognized potential role of blue carbon in the NDC system. That's also adding more opportunities, and that also bringing more encouragement. So we are observing now in Indonesia a lot more of the carbon cowboys and carbon cowgirls now coming back to Indonesia after disappearing for about 5 years. So now they're all coming back and trying to look for opportunities. And it is very interesting to look at the development that they are now looking not for such a big area. They said, okay, minimum 2,000 hectares we can do as long as the carbon will turn out to be significant after the calculation. And then interestingly also that these people are coming with the promise, with the idea of bringing in the impact investment facilities to finance all the preparation until the carbon is credited. So I thought, wow, this is a very, very interesting development. And in fact, my organization, Conservation Strategy Fund Indonesia, we are talking to 2 companies. Both of them are trying to work with us to look for sites in which this can be developed. So I think this is very interesting. And I also heard from Mary that there have been some new registration of potential blue carbon projects in the National Registry System or in the REDD+ system. So I think in the context of research, from all angles, I think it is very important to bring all these new projects into this research, Pak Luki, so we can extract more lesson from what's going on in the field, what's going on from the financing side, what's going on from the social institutionalization side, because Mary was researching on this issue of the agreement can take years for it to form, and then how the benefit is actually being shared. Of course, a lot of this facing also cynicism feel from the large part of community after not being real for about 10 years. So now I think if there are ways to actually putting it into the real dialogue with real calculation, then this can fly quite quickly in my view, because the regulation is now allows that to happen. So I guess I will stop there, Pak Luki. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think all of these 3 points, if I'm not mistaken, from Pak Mubarik, I would like to invite Ibu Mari to respond, especially in the context of the keyword of inclusive blue carbon economy, including some of the local community, I think the seagrass, mangrove included, all of the coastal wetland is part of our community-based livelihood, so that how the benefit sharing, inclusivity, etc. will be tackled in the very good ways for the blue carbon. Get some lesson learned from quote-unquote green carbon policy. Bu Mari, I will invite you to respond to Pak Mubarik. Mbak atau Ibu ya, Bu Maludia, kami persilakan.
Hello.
Yes, I hear you. Yeah, okay. Can you open your camera? Perhaps you can have some. Okay. Can you please introduce yourself first, ya, Ibu Maludia?
Hello everyone. Good night from Indonesia. I'm Lydia Kotratonada. I'm a master student in public policy of climate change. It's the first program in the world. So I would like to ask some questions.
From which university, Mbak Maulidia?
Indonesian International Islamic University, sir.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Pak Komarudin ya?
Yeah. Okay. First question. Firstly, I would like to apologize if this question sounds lame, because I'm the youngest one in this field. So first question is for Prof. Catherine. Is Australian blue carbon method, which is tidal restorations, have any negative impact to other sector or causing maladaptations, like geoengineering problem? So, and the second question I would like to address to Dr. Mari. Why financial contribution from developing country to developed country like Indonesia are not given to environmental NGOs to avoid misallocation or risk of corruption? And the third one, is a blue carbon policy politically feasible enough to be made? And that's it. My questions, sir. Thank you.
Okay, Ibu Mbak ya, I think I call you Mbak ya because still very young. Mbak Maulidia, thank you for your very what's that motivative question. But I think this will be addressed to Ibu Mari, especially the second and the third question. But for the first question of Mbak Maulidia will be addressed to Prof. Lovelock. So I think from the time's concern, I would like to stop the discussion for now. So I will back to the panelists to respond what actually Pak Imam, Pak Mubarik, and Mbak Maulidia question, and I will give times to Professor Lovelock to respond the question. Prof. Lovelock, time is yours.
Thank you, Pak Luki and others. So actually, I first wanted to say something about seaweed, if I may, just briefly, because it is such an emerging topic and we are spending some time on it in Australia as well as everywhere else in the world. And currently there is no IPCC guidance, right? So that is a big stop for many. But you know, other market methodologies are being developed. And I think it really depends on whether you're restoring seaweed beds, whether you've got some application like reducing ruminants. There's also proposals to bury it at sea. So, you know, like it's pretty wide ranging. And I think there's still quite a lot of science to do to be confident in the abatement offered by seaweed farming, except perhaps the sediment under seaweed farms. There's a paper coming out soon that I believe has evidence that this is actually carbon sequestration. So the science policy gap is often really wide, and it's partly because policymakers don't necessarily know who to talk to, and scientists often talk a different language, a completely different language. So the thing I think that really helped in Australia for the blue carbon method getting us together was really willingness, right? So we had a whole bunch of scientists who were prepared to bury some of their disagreements, to bury some of their competitiveness and other things, to join in a joint effort that everybody saw was really worthwhile. And I think this this willingness is just so important, and you know, willingness and generosity actually. And I found that it was really driven a lot by influential people who were prepared to reach out to scientists and not just talk to one, but talk to many, you know. And then for the scientists to actually all get together and speak with one voice as well was a really important part of this process. So go broad, you know, you need really key champions to get across that divide. You need to, like, you know, give those people who really have the energy to do it support them to actually do it. And then the final question was about tidal restoration, and pretty much it was about perverse outcomes and negative things on the landscape, particularly geoengineering. And I'd say with all carbon projects, there is room for perverse outcomes. And that's why the regulatory frameworks around methods are so important, right? Because basically, as you make the method, you have to think about all of those things, and you may not think of every single one, right? So it's just, I think, one of the, negative things about carbon markets and carbon methodologies is there's always a risk of some kind of perverse activity arising from it. Even as Mari alluded to, the greenwashing being a big, problem with market-based methodologies. So oil companies, for example, can invest in blue carbon while doing nothing about emission reductions, right? So there's always a risk. We've also seen some proposals for some projects that seek to change ecosystems for the benefit of growing mangroves rather than replacing ecosystems or leaving ecosystems where they really should be. And I think a greater knowledge by the regulator is needed to make sure those things don't happen. So education within the policy space is really important, So it's always great. Scientists get to know your policy people and vice versa. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Lovelock. Yes, indeed. Personally, I agree with you that you also mentioned in your slide related with the inclusivity. So transdisciplinary approach on this blue carbon. The natural scientists should be also working with the social scientists, and then put together the new share vision and mission related with this context of especially Indonesia, because I know that somehow still very challenge to work together related with this issue. But your motivating expression will be very good to be addressed in our community. Thank you, Catherine. So I'd like to invite Bu Mari. Maybe you can have some short response on the inclusivity, benefit sharing, as well as the what we call about the context of the political opportunity and finance thing related with the context of the blue carbon. Bu Mari, maybe you have
right. Thank you. Yes, I will try to be very brief, but actually, Pak Mubarik comments and questions from Maulidia are related. So first of all, because REDD+ has been tried to be implemented since arguably 2010 from the first phase, second, and then the implementation stage. So the blue carbon community can actually benefit from all the REDD+ policies and measures and architecture that have been tried. Some of them failed, some of them are successful. So, for example, with regard to the concept of inclusivity, and also Prof. Locke mentioned about the risks of the integrity of emission reductions or greenwashing. These risks are actually accounted within the recent REDD+ methodologies and standards, including the notion of FPIC, free prior informed consent, and then gold standards of some of REDD+ methodologies, benefit sharing mechanism, etc. These architectures and measures are developed. So the question is how we, this rather new blue carbon society, gain the benefit of this 20 years development or 20 years plus. Everything is actually not everything, but most important things that we could think of are developed already. I just briefly on the impact investment facilities remarked by Pak Mubarik, where actually the private sectors often bring all the resources required, including financial, source, and technology to develop carbon-based project. In the future, I would propose, Prof. Luki, that we perhaps include, the representative of the private sector to also present findings from the ground of the challenges experienced by the private sectors, while actually they want to bring financial resources and technology, but so many barriers and hurdles on the ground, both from on the part of the government, but also local communities, and the communication and the work of community engagement in REDD+ case could take more than 2 years. However, I suggest that because they have been tried out, the blue carbon implementation may actually hasten this process. Political feasibility, Maulidia, I must say that the more I read and listen to, to so many webinars of blue carbon policy in Indonesia and from Indonesian political leaders within the Ministry of Forestry and the Environment and Ministry of Maritime Affairs and Bappenas, I must say that I sort of have a great hope. And it's rather different feeling than when REDD+ was introduced, with so many suspicious that this was greenwashing. But with this blue carbon, it seems to me that so many different diverse stakeholders are come together and believe that the potential is huge. Infrastructure, measures, policy are in place. So hopefully we can move forward very quickly with keeping the integrity of the emission reduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mbak Mari. As we look at from the context of, for example, the next Indonesian 2045, we observe that there are 8 agendas of Indonesian 2045, and the environment, including this blue carbon policy, put in the agenda number 5, related with the context of the backbone of the 3 transformation of Indonesia: social, economics, and governance. But we thought there is number 1, 2, 3, and then number 4 is actually backbone of the social, and then number 5 is backbone of ecosystem or environment. So this one actually, I support you that we do have like more great hope for the next agenda of Indonesian political environment related with the blue carbon. We have to do together, as Professor Lovelock mentioned, all of the civil society should get in the same vision and mission. Thank you, Mbak Mari. And then we come to Mas Aan, especially the context of seaweed, Mas. And then number 2 is related with the scientist inclusivity or science championship related with the blue carbon. What do you think, Mas, related with this, Mas?
Yeah, thank you, Pak Luki. So regarding seaweed, yeah, I know that there is a debate still within the researcher that is the seaweed actually can be considered as the carbon dioxide removal. But yes, if only, in my opinion, that if seaweed is considered can be considered as blue carbon or carbon dioxide removal. If the seaweed is in the wild ecosystem, I mean, like in the temperate area, we have cap forest or seaweed forest that's naturally existing in the ecosystem, and similar to the seagrass in the tropical area, that seaweed forest in the temperate area can be considered as blue carbon ecosystem. But regarding the seaweed ranching, I am in position that it cannot be considered as a blue carbon or carbon dioxide removal, because any activities regarding the ranching is actually leave the carbon footprint. So even though we, for example, in Indonesia, we have many tons of seaweed production, but eventually the carbon is not actually buried in the ecosystem, but then just used for the food processing and etc., and which is actually releasing carbon again to the atmosphere. So yeah, if seaweed can be as the ecosystem like wild seaweed and not in the form of the marine ranching, then maybe it can be used as the part of the blue carbon solution. But if it's in the mariculture or marine ranching, it's hardly to believe that it can be considered as a natural base carbon dioxide removal. And the second is regarding the inclusivity of, yes, I totally agree that because of this is the issues is actually not only in regard of the scientific community, but also the policy and also many aspects, many disciplinary. Then we have to work together and then seek the solution, a better solution together. Thank you, Prof. Lucky.
Thank you very much. Yes, we look at very insightful feedback from you related to the seaweed and inclusivity of the science. Seaweed still debatable, I know that, but theoretically seaweed is part of the has a role in the climate, but we have to do some more research, especially the comparison between, say, farm seaweed and wild seaweed. And for the context of farm seaweed, according to our research, we still have like make up deficit of the emission. So a very slow, a very small absorption, but then more emission related to the recent research by our one of my students. Here we have Dr. Ali Mahshar, also part of the supervisors at that time. So thank you very much for your insight. And then I would like to invite Ibu Sally Base for how was the what is the lowest hanging fruit of the blue carbon policy, including of course seaweed, because you mentioned in your slide seaweed potential of the contact of blue carbon. Yes, Sally.
Sure, thanks for that. I'm not going to get into the question of seaweed as a sequestration source, but I do think that there is some conflict in Indonesia where seaweed farming is being permitted over seagrass meadows, and I think that's, you know, a really simple low-hanging fruit to say no, that shouldn't be occurring in any circumstances. One blue carbon ecosystem in the detriment of another isn't ever going to be a positive thing. There are some areas, some of our research looked at where there are areas of mangroves compared to where the deforest rates have historically been and are still high or low. So, you know, obviously protecting those areas immediately where there is substantial deforestation. And there are substantial carbon stores in those mangrove forests, but also looking further afield to areas such as Papua and making sure that level of deforestation doesn't kick off there in those areas that have got really high carbon stores and aren't suffering that level of deforestation. I think another area that maybe is more a regulatory approach is looking at aggregation, where you're looking at carbon elements. We really are often hampered in our progress in terms of how an area is defined in a regulatory sense in terms of being carbon market ready. And if we can look at aggregating a little bit more, AI is probably a good option for that. And finally, I think one that we haven't really picked up on enough yet and that we're going to look back and regret if we're not very careful is that of bottom disturbance. I know Indonesia has recently been lifting its ban on sand mining, and a large portion of that sand is to go to Singapore to do land reclamation. I would caution against establishing a new industry where there's a large portion of bottom disturbance there. So that would probably be my lowest hanging fruit. One other quick comment in terms of perverse outcomes, which is looking a little bit beyond the ecosystem perverse outcomes and looking also at the perverse outcomes that happen to communities that are nearby. Certainly in putting bans on accessing blue carbon ecosystems, sometimes there are outcomes that are very negative to a community where maybe a complete ban to access is not the right way to go, but limitations on what can be done in those areas. So I think, you know, slightly more mature approaches to the policy development can be really helpful. Thanks.
Thank you, Sally, for your feedbacks. Yes, thank you very much for that. The lowest hanging fruit. And ladies and gentlemen, I know the time is already over related with the also Maghrib time. So I will not continue the discussion. I just want to back to the all of the panelists' presentation, all of the feedback from the audience online and offline, and also the response of the panelists. I will back to the three objective of the workshop. The first is the prospect and challenge. Yes, we have a prospect as well as challenges. Sally clearly about the local challenges and global challenges. Ibu Catherine also mentioned about the context of the implementation challenge. Ibu Mari focused on the context of, say, for example, the governance challenge, policy challenge. And then Pak Aan also mentioned about the gap of technology and innovation, science, including the inclusivity of the science itself. But perspective, we will not discuss about that. Clear, the prospect is there. Blue carbon, the rule of the ocean is clear enough for that. The second objective related with the context lesson learned, yes, we understand that lesson learned from Australia, from Monash, from Queensland, Ibu Mari, we get some lesson learned from the past RED Plus experience, and Mas Aan, updating the context of the blue carbon science. Yeah, we get that one. But then we still remaining one question related with the next step. But then I will say that the question number 3, the objective number 3 of the workshop will be follow up with the next agenda. Not yet clear articulated, but we understand that the next step is there already. At least the context of the science, data, policies still there. So we will discuss more on the context of the answering the objective number 3. But some insight, some potential ideas there related with the next step of this blue carbon policy. So by saying that, I would like to express grateful thanks to all of the panelists, Professor Lovelock, Ibu Mari Mulyani, Mas Aan, and then Sally Bashe, my friends, related with this workshop, and also with the contact of all of the participants online and offline. I would like to express grateful thanks. By saying that, I would like to also apologize if there is some unconventional thing happens in my facilitation during this workshop. Thank you very much for all, and I will back to the our lovely master ceremony, Ibu Dr. Ayu Evinia. Back to you, Mbak Ayu, and before that, let's have a very big applause to all of us.
Thank you very much, Prof. Lucky Adrianto, for leading the panel discussion very well. And thanks to all the panelists who give us the valuable insight about blue carbon economy and policy. Before we end this workshop, I will give the opportunity to the head of Department of Aquatic Resources Management to give the closing remarks. Prof. Hefni, please welcome.
Hello. Masih mute, Prof.
Okay, yeah. You hear me now? Okay, good afternoon, everyone here in Indonesia, and good evening for our friend from Australia. and perhaps our friend from UK is still midday. Okay, after listening to presentation from a number of prominent scientists about blue carbon, there was actually a lot of new knowledge and also new perspective about blue carbon. Apart from that, we also know a number of gaps between the depths of knowledge regarding carbon in terrestrial ecosystem and also in aquatic ecosystem. And through this workshop, we also become aware of the gap between science and policy regarding blue carbon, as well as how all stakeholders, either government, researcher, academia, and society dealing with this emerging issue. There are still many things that we need to study to raise blue carbon in this system in Indonesia, because with the large number of mangrove, seagrass, and salt marshes ecosystem area, the blue carbon issue has become an outstanding issue to be more addressed in Indonesia. We hope that this workshop can give rise to the new research and education collaborations scheme between Queensland, Monash, Oxford, and BRIN, and IPB, of course. Yeah. And now I'm very grateful to all the invited speakers who have presented a very interesting and emerging topic. And thank also go to Prof. Lucky, who has moderated this workshop brilliantly. Please give to him applause. Okay. And then also thank to a participant, either online or offline, who actively participate in this event. And eventually, I close this events by saying thanks God, Alhamdulillah. Assalamualaikum, back to you, Mbak Ayu. Okay.
Thank you, Prof. Hefni. For all participants, please kindly fill the attendance form to get the certificate. And for the distinguished panelists, we will send the certificate shortly by email. And for participants offline here in hotel, we provide you dinner in the 7th floor. And for those who join online, you can have dinner at your own place. Thank you so much for attending this seminar. See you again in the next event. Bye.